Catus Maximus here, this time with a little video about this SPI Germany 2-inch long travel dial indicator. SPI was actually a brand that came out, I think, in like the 80s. And throughout the 80s and 90s, they made pretty nice tools in a variety of nice countries, such as Germany, Austria, even some in Switzerland. I believe SPI even stands for Swiss Products International or something like that. And then in like the 2000s, they decided they weren't making enough money and started just going all Chinese. And finally, a company called MSC, which is like the Amazon of industrial tooling and supplies, bought them, and it's just like their budget line. And it's really unfortunate because this is not yet another one of those brands that built their name with pretty nice tools for the price. Definitely not quite the same level as, say, Starrett, Mitutoyo, Brown & Sharp. But certainly pretty darn nice, and this really is made in Germany. I think you can just read that right there, and I like it a lot. It uses, the only plastic on here is this, well, the lens and then this bezel, and I don't mind that because then you don't have that kind of weird side clamp that you have to fiddle with like a more standard ones. I should mention that this thing is really heavy, really hefty. This is the Harbor Freight one, and we can see that the rod is quite a bit thicker just to make it a bit more rigid. Pretty smooth action all the way through. This is not jeweled, but it's still pretty good action. It is German made. I like the fact that it has a 360-degree dial, and the fact that instead of ones like this where you have this little dial to tell, you know, how the more coarse measurements, each pass of the needle is 100,000ths, and then this is telling you, say, right here you might be close to a quarter of an inch or so. This SPI uses a black and then a red needle, and obviously that dial is much larger, much easier to see that you're at a quarter of an inch or something like that. Really good tolerances, really low backlash, almost no backlash. Dial indicators do have springs on the gears to help reduce their backlash, but there's still a vast difference in quality. Let me even demonstrate that with the scale. I don't know if how the camera can just barely pick it up. Here's the Harbor Freight, and I know that this one is a 2-inch, but the weight difference is stark. Here's the Harbor Freight, 136 grams. Here's this old SPI German, 309 grams. It's 2.5 times the mass of the Harbor Freight. Really pretty surprising. Dial indicators are great. You use them, you know, with various stands. Here would be considered a more of a traditional stand where you can articulate it. There are ones that have more flexible. I do have a Japanese-made Modern Tools Corp base on this, but you'd use a stand like that, and you can use these in so many different places. Checking actual valve backlash by, especially these 2-inch ones, because they allow you just a lot more reach. Really allows you to get really deep into places. I like the SPI. This actually has multiple springs. There's a coiled spring in this, which puts tension on the rod itself, and then there are additional springs inside for the gear backlash, and I'll show that. Nice little knurled end, so it's easy to pull it. Dual rings to slide these little indicators. They are removable, easily removable. There's a little notch. You can use a little micro screwdriver. They're just like a snap ring. You can remove them and easily replace the lens. But as far as the usefulness, these are used in machine shops all the time. I showed how using one of these when I was precision bending a wrench. That way you could actually see exactly how far you're going and in your bends to actually not overbend something. Absolutely invaluable. You can use them as depth gauges to see how deep something is, because you just zero it on the surface and then drop it down into your hole. And obviously a 2-inch one just gives you that much more reach. Standard threaded replaceable tips. Overall, a pretty nice unit. Now the other thing, and I'm going to go ahead and open both of these up. Let me get some more zoom here. I'm going to open both. I mean, the quality difference is all over the place, not just the mass. You can see how tight fitting the screws are on the SPI. The Harbor Freight, really pretty loose. Anyway, let's get the backs off of both of these. And just every point you interact with this SPI versus the Harbor Freight. And it's what's sad is they still sell this, but it's Chinese made and it's really much less lower quality. There's the SPI German made screws, really nice precision screws, even thicker threads than these little Harbor Freight ones. Now we'll pop open the backs. And you can just see the internals. The Harbor Freight's really basic. You can see that this SPI uses really nice, large, oversized gears. You can see the nice spiral springs for the anti-backlash in those indicating gears. Beautiful screws. There's just a lot of meat in there. There's a lot of material in this mechanism versus the Harbor Freight, which is just really basic. They're using this rod to keep it aligned. This rod, I think, has some kind of notch that aligns in here to prevent them from twisting. They can't twist because the teeth that are cut into it need to interact with the mechanism inside. The Harbor Freight just uses a little basic wound spring. Just a really basic unit. Where this SPI, once again, just has this wonderful mechanism. Just really well built. Really overbuilt. Once again, beautiful screws. Nice quality springs in there. Such a shame that SPI is yet another company that is cheapified on their tools. Anyway, that's my review of the SPI. I guess the only thing that really is good about SPI now is the fact that since they're all just cheap, unfortunately mostly Chinese products, you can find them on the used market for a pretty good price. And people who know about or are generally familiar with machinist tools and measuring instruments, that's what they know SPI as. So you can actually find pretty good deals on eBay for these old ones, which actually are good, such as this German-made one. As we saw, the internals just absolutely, the whole thing just shames this Harbor Freight. 2.5 times the mass with only 1 inch more travel. Really surprising. And once again, generally speaking, 2-inch travel dial indicators are really handy. There's only pretty limited situations where this long rear stem can cause, interference issues just because of how much clearance it needs. But that's an easy price to pay to be able to have something with just so much travel. Really pretty satisfied with this. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody who's been watching and subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Till next time, Catus Maximus out.